Movies with Mikey recently made a video on animated films that have meant something to him over the course of his life, at the end of which he asked for people to come forward and make their own videos and create a discussion. As it happens, I'm a huge lover of animation, and I have been since I was a kid. I've always admired the creativity and dedication behind the painstaking process of making still drawings and models transform into living, breathing characters. So today, I'm discussing some animated films and TV shows which have taught me lessons over the years and had a profound effect on me in wildly different ways. Some of these were childhood favourites, others I only watched recently, but all of them have struck a chord and stayed with me, so I'm going to share them with you today. Let's start things off with a British classic, Wallace and Gromit. Growing up, we didn't watch many films. They were a rare treat. And for the first 8 years of my childhood, we had an old box TV with 4 channels and only a handful of VHS tapes. As a consequence, I used to watch a lot of movies over and over again, and one of my favourites was Wallace and Gromit. This series of short films created by Nick Park in the mid-90s was endlessly entertaining to me. I loved the unique blend of cartoon characters and playful humour, all set against a backdrop of mundane small-town England.
No, don't get up. I'll use my new remote control device.
The series centres on cheese-obsessed inventor Wallace, who lives with his pet dog Gromit, and creates ridiculous and wonderful inventions to perform everyday jobs. These intricate machines tend to drive the narrative of the films, and I just couldn't get enough of them. The characters are great fun to watch, especially Wallace, who is well-meaning if a bit clueless. The performance by Peter Sallis really makes it memorable. Gromit is a silent character, a brilliant decision which puts all of the performance in the animation. The way his eyes express so much emotion with only a brow movement is astonishing. Nick Park is a genius comedian and writes extremely endearing characters that represent the epitome of comfortable Middle England. He excels at turning this ordinary environment into the setting for many different genres of films. Thriller, sci-fi, horror, heist, he's done them all.
Catch me, Gromit!
For a young kid who wasn't that good at many school subjects at the time, these films were an inspiration. I always enjoyed making models since I first got my hands on a lump of clay, and seeing films made from nothing but plasticine thrilled me. The sheer amount of possibility open to my 8-year-old brain was incredible, and I spent many of my subsequent years making models out of plasticine, clay, and even blue tack. There was something about the style of Wallace and Gromit that stood out as well. It might have been the fact that even though the models were mostly the same material, they were always textured brilliantly. Metal devices were shiny and appeared hard, fabrics had the same pattern as in the real world, and food stuff always looked better than in real life. Indeed, the biggest disappointment of my childhood was learning that you can't actually make perfect bite marks when you eat a sandwich.
Well done, we did it! Ha ha!
Keeping with my childhood, Ewoks was an animated TV show I adored as a young kid. Bear with me, because this is a bit of a weird one. When I was young and had yet to watch the original Star Wars films, I didn't realise that Ewoks were a part of it. So when I watched the cartoon from the mid-80s, I had no idea it was set in the Star Wars universe. Can you really blame me? I was a kid, and the series has magic and fairies and stone spears. It's about as far removed from the world of Han Solo and Skywalker as you could get. It took actually watching the original films to realise that the Ewoks were actually in the same universe. But I digress. I watched the show at my granddad's house in the Lake District, who had them all taped on VHS, which meant I always watched them out of order and I never finished the series. Still, I always begged Grandad to put them on every time we visited, blissfully ignoring the beautiful view of mountains and lakes right next to me. But enough about why I watched the show. What did I learn from it? To be honest, not much. The show isn't actually that well made. The animation is standard mid-80s Saturday morning style, and the voice acting was mostly sincere but very over the top.
Huh? Honest, Mom, they shot down out of the sky, throwing mud at everything. Right, Wicket? Thunderbats? Very interesting. Did the bats drop this, too?
What does make it different is that it has a lot of heart. The lessons, while simple and cheesy, are never cynical or thrown in. The characters always grow as people in each episode in some way, and the villains can be very intimidating for a kids' show. In particular, the villain of the first season, Morag the Tulga Witch, was downright scary to the kid version of me. She has a raspy voice, monologues about killing the heroes, which she nearly does on several occasions, and she burns half the forest down at one point. However, for me it was more than just the cartoon. My half-aunt used to watch the show when she was younger, so it was a connection between her and me and my siblings. It was something we could bond over, something that my granddad could put on every time we went up as a tradition. In that sense, the show might not actually be good, but it means a lot to me, and has the catchiest theme song I have ever heard.
We are the Ewoks, friendly spirits from the forest glow. We're Ewoks, friendly spirits from the forest glow.
I thought long and hard about which films I should cover in this video, going back and forth on different Disney movies, depending on whether or not I felt it would be better to do more interesting films, or ones that I simply enjoyed. Ultimately, I've gone with Fantasia, not just because I think it's one of the most experimental and ambitious things Disney's ever done, but because it definitely taught me something about animation, and film in general. Music matters. Now, I've never been a particularly musical person. I listen to songs based on nothing more than if I like them. I don't really have favourite bands, and I have a very eclectic taste. However, something I adore listening to is movie soundtracks. I swear I must have listened to Lord of the Rings soundtrack on repeat for centuries while I studied. But before I watched The Lord of the Rings, when I was young, I saw Fantasia. This anthology film, showing various animated segments designed specifically around certain pieces of classical music, blew me away as a kid. It's a testament to how to craft stories with no dialogue, and it showed me the power of music in creating emotional resonance, although I didn't know it was called that at the time. All I knew was, Night on Bald Mountain was freaky as hell, and that music was making it 10 times worse. The Rite of Spring, depicting the entire history of the dinosaurs, was exhilarating and even educational. Honestly, I didn't know as a kid the specific reasons why this film was so good, or how unusual it was in the Disney roster. All I knew was this film made me feel things. The music and the animations simultaneously alarmed and excited me. It was the first time I can remember really engaging with art. I loved it, and it was a DVD I kept coming back to again and again. Even now I can put it on and let the music guide my feelings in new and interesting ways. In fact, now that I have a certain amount of knowledge about movies, I can go back and appreciate all the ways this film breaks new ground. Not bad for a company that made a fortune off the back of public domain fairy tales. Since I started studying film, I've had to watch a lot of films that I normally wouldn't bother with, which admittedly has forced me out of my comfort zone. One such film that I was surprised to enjoy was Persepolis, an animated French-Iranian biographical film about a young girl growing up during the Iranian Revolution. Normally, a biographical French film would not be my cup of tea, but this film proved me very wrong. Created from Marjane Satrapi's autobiographical novel of the same name, The animation uses simplistic black and white designs which powerfully offset some of the darker moments. The film manages to be a great insight into the trials and tribulations of female adolescence, made more impactful as it takes place during an actual revolution. I was struck by how much humour the creators managed to inject. The main character, Marjan, Satrapi herself as a young girl, is a strong and irrepressible person. Her character brings natural humour and a much-needed light tone amidst the harsh reality she lives through. The film has a strong emotional core that really got through to me and makes what could easily turn into a dry history lesson into a very personal and emotional journey. I love the animation style and I admire the main character greatly, who never lets the hand life has dealt her get her down. She is an inspiration not just to women, but to everyone. Her relationships with her parents, especially her grandmother, is both heartwarming and at times heart-wrenching. Her struggle with romance in the limiting environment caused by the revolution is eye-opening and hilarious alternately.
Stop running! It's what you call immodest.
Well, then stop staring at my butt!
That said, she isn't perfect. Near the end of the film, she starts to abuse the system to get away with petty crimes, often blaming men for staring at her to avoid suspicion. The film doesn't shy away from showing her pitfalls as a person, as well as showing her learning from her mistakes. The graphic novel element of the animation manages to bridge any possible cultural gaps, with the simplistic style allowing characters to seem as though they could come from anywhere. The themes themselves are universal. The fact that the characters don't seem foreign means that what happens in their country feels as though it could easily happen anywhere. In the end, I enjoyed this film much more than I thought I would. It has deep themes and excellent animation and writing, but if you aren't interested in the technical side of things, it's also very entertaining, deeply emotional, and thought-provoking. All these films have shown me things about animation, and cinema in general, that I have carried into my adulthood. But for me it's more than that. For very different reasons, each of these films means something personal to me, and so, to me, they are elevated above their actual quality. Not all of these are masterpieces. In fact, Ewoks isn't very good at all. But they've all influenced how I see animation, and so they're all very important films to me. And that's what animation does. It gives us a platform from which to express ourselves, our stories, and our experiences. In that way, it can be a very personal experience, and something that forges a connection between the creator and the viewer. But the way I watch these films is very different in some cases to the way the original filmmakers intended. But that's the joy of film. It can mean something unique to you. I hope that one day I might make something that a young kid watches and that it stays with them for a lifetime, perhaps even with their children. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy this. I'm new to the whole video essay stuff, so any feedback would be helpful. And if you had fun, please consider liking the video and subscribing to let me know that you want some more.